Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's read along with Jason and Leslie, where we show you definitively why these types of things should definitely be left to professional voice actors.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining us. How are you tonight, Leslie?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Are you nervous about doing this?
Um, I have many years of story time with my kids as experience, so hopefully I'll
Yeah.
do all right. But I'm
Okay.
not a professional in any means.
uh, I also did story time with my kids, but that was a long time ago. So we'll see. Um, Tonight's story is The Fruit of the Princess Tree. Okay, let me preface this. I'm going to say the author's name. I hope that I pronounced the last name correctly. Sage Tyrtle. Tyrtle. Sage Tyrtle. Close. And
Hopefully,
I apologize profusely to Sage. Um, I really should have figured this out before the stream, but as as they say, uh, well, that's just Jason for you, right? Alrighty. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read the first half of the story, and Leslie will read the second half. And depending on how many tears were flowing, uh, or how our voices are doing, Leslie and I will probably talk briefly about how much we love this story and just praise it all to pieces. You know what? I am a little bit nervous. I usually never get nervous for live streams, but I am today.
you'll do great. I have the sad part at the end.
Yeah. Um, The Fruit of the Princess Tree by Sage Tyrtle. Content warning. There is death and dying, sexism, and misogyny. So if any of those bother you, you may want to mute. At the top of a hill dotted with bluebells, the tiny cages of the princess tree flutter in the breeze. By April, the bottom of each cage is a heavy circle. Thin silver bars stretch without a seam to the top, where they bow inwards again and meet in the center. Inside every cage is a furled flower, trembling with promise, blushing petals soft as the thought of a summer cloud. None of the cages have doors. By May, the petals have spread open to reveal the princesses inside. 17 in total. Like baby snakes, the seedling princesses have just enough knowledge to keep them alive. They turn their faces to the sun and the rain. They keep themselves clean and sweet-smelling and practice enticing smiles on each other through the bars of the cages. Their rosebud lips are ever moist, and they dream confused dreams of brocaded silk gowns and big bellies. The princesses begin life with the same small vocabulary, words like obedience and yes and I'm sorry. They are born knowing their fate. Songbirds swoop around the tree, but never alight there. There is nothing to eat. Princess 5 nibbles her white glove. Princess 14 forces her sapphire ring over the joint of her thumb to make herself cry, so she can taste the salt of her tears. Princess 2 waits until everyone is asleep and tries to eat a candy pink petal. It hurts and tastes of blood. The cages are exactly big enough to hold one princess in a sitting position. Each princess hugs her dimpled knees, rests her chin there. Some wear into the gold gowns, some pearl encrusted bodices, some transparent scarves over ornately plaited hair. Some have rings piercing their noses. Some wear tightly fitting lace ruffs or flowing sleeves so large they use them as blankets at night. One hoop skirt is so enormous that it shuts out the sun and rain until the thing inside withers away and the cage falls to the ground and rots. Flies buzz over the hoop skirt and then inside. No one talks about it. One fine June day, a prince gallops up the hill, riding a black horse with a cream-colored mane and tail. Almost every princess clutches their cage bars, saying, "Pretty horsey, pretty prince." At the top of the tree, the 17th princess stays silent. She is thinking that the horse's haunches look delicious. The prince dismounts in one fluid jump. He is wearing a spotless blouse under his doublet. His muscular calves are sheathed in silken hose, moving with ease. Divide his smooth-skinned face into 3 equal parts, and they measure equally. The length of his ear is equal to the length of his nose. The distance between his eyes is the width of one eye. All of this amounts to such a perfect face, it's impossible for the sighing, swanning princesses to keep his face clear in their heads. He is exquisite, but blurry. The horse snuffles at Two's hands, and she strokes its soft nose. The prince shades his eyes as he looks from the bottom of the tree to the top and back again. Whispers begin. "Pick me, oh, pick me." 8 reaches her fingers through the silver bars of her cage and pushes on a nearby branch. Her cage rocks like a baby's cradle, and the prince looks up at her. "Wide hips. Good," he says. In the next cage, 9 waves at the prince. 10 sets her cage rocking too, then 7 and 12, and the prince chuckles to see the cages swaying in charming unison. Long princess fingers laced around the silver bars to brace the ones inside. Alone at the top of the tree, 17 peers down, watching the silver hoop that bites into the top of 10's branch. But the hoop never moves. The cage just slides back and forth. She sighs. The prince strolls around the tree. He stops in front of 5, hands on hips. "Won't you smile for me?" he says, and if they had heard him crooning to his horse that morning, they would recognize his tone. 5 shines a lighthouse smile on the prince. "Strong teeth," he says, and continues walking. When he comes back around the 5, he clicks his tongue and the horse trots over. He mounts, and one of the higher-numbered princesses lets out a cry. But instead of riding away, the prince rises with grace to stand in the stirrups, his face even with 9's cage. Without touching the cage, he teases her lustrous braid between the silver bars and tickles the end of his nose. 9 says, "Oh, you silly man," which are 4 of the small pool of words she was born with. Above 9, 14 uses her scepter to touch the prince's curly hair. "Don't forget to look up," she says. The prince does look up, and to admiring gasps, grabs hold of the branch that once held a hoop skirt inside a cage and doesn't anymore. He pulls until he's sitting on the branch, level with 14. His horse looks up for a moment and ambles off. 14 touches her lips with her fingers. Her sapphire ring flashes in the sun. "Isn't that lovely?" says the prince. "What's on your other hand, precious thing?" 14 leans forward, meeting his eyes. "Oh, Prince, I am so happy to—" "Just show me your hand," says the prince. 14 drops her eyes and holds up her other hand to show a ring made entirely of diamonds. The stone, the band, everything. Now it's the prince's turn to gasp. He reaches forward and runs his palm down the bars of the cage. When he does, the gusty wails of the princesses are almost enough to start the cages swinging again. 14's cage begins to elongate, stretching, dropping at an elegant pace until it touches the ground. By the time it does, it's tall enough for 14 to stand. Her beaming searchlight of a smile, putting 5 to shame. Silver bars peel away, like petals opening, and 14 stretches her long arms and legs. Alone at the top of the tree, 17 has never seen her sisters, only the tops of their cages. She leans close to the bar and watches. 14 is wearing a plum-colored dress under a long lilac robe. Her silken hair reaches to her knees. The prince jumps from the branch, landing on his feet. He takes 14 in his arms and kisses her, burying his hands in her long hair. When he lets her go, her eyes are wide and uncertain. The prince clicks his tongue, and the horse comes prancing, tail held high. He leaps into the saddle, then sweeps 14 up the side saddle in front of him. 17 can hear her say, "Wait, I'm not ready to," before the horse gallops away. 17 watches the horse move over the meadows for a long time. She tells herself she's imagining 14 struggles to get down. The princesses gabble almost until dawn. "Did you see?" And "My rings are only copper." And "What does he mean, good wide hips?" And above, 17 touches the bars of her cage in the same place the prince touched 14's cage. Nothing happens. She runs her fingers across the bottom and the curved bars at the top. She touches every square inch of silver, but she remains a princess trapped in a cage exactly big enough to sit inside. It is too small for her fury. The next day the princes are dreamy and slow to speak. It takes 17 a long time to explain to the 2 below her how to touch the neighboring cage like a prince. When 15 understands, she reaches to her own bars, but 16 shouts, "Don't!" 15 recoils. "Don't touch my cage," says 16. "What if it works? There's no prince here." All through the prince's tree, cages rock as the sisters nod and call to each other, saying, "Don't touch," and "Don't run," and "Don't listen." 17 pleads until her voice goes hoarse, but the princesses have all covered their ears. They all whisper to themselves to drown her out until 17 gives up. When it begins to rain, 17 puts her hand outside the cage bars. She turns her hand palm up, down, and up again. Drips drop into her mouth, and she wonders what it feels like to be not hungry. After the first prince, there is a flood of princes, tall and stout, thin and short, in shiny leather boots and shoes that curl at the tip, barking voices and soft voices, and, most memorably, the prince who never says a word but dances, leaps, twirls when 8 steps out of her cage. Most of the princes run their hands over her cage before leaving. With every departure, the remaining princes are hungrier. They are louder. The lowered eyelashes abandon for pleas and shouts, and finally, in 12's case, an outright lie. "I own all the land east of the river." When 10 is picked, she grips her startled prince's frilled shirt and says, I'm hungry, over and over, and the prince takes an apple out of his pocket and holds it out to 10, who cradles it with both hands, eating fast, not stopping until it's gone. Even the seeds, even the stem. 17 touches her own chin and finds it slick with saliva. Sometimes the princesses spend their days in silence, breath and birdsong the only sounds. Once, 15 is restyling her long black hair, and she clicks her mahogany hairpin against the cage bars. Below her, 6 asks to hear the sound again. 11 tries to make the same sound with her mouth, and soon every princess is playing, is finding a rhythm, a way to a sound. 3 contributes a soaring birdsong note that swoops around the rhythms, that captures them all. When 3 stops, 2 begs her to sing again. The flood of princes slows to a river and then a trickle. For the first time, a day goes by with no visits, then 2 days. As 4 is assuring her sisters that a prince will come any moment, 17 says, "Isn't it possible that the last prince has come?" 4 says, "Why are you always trying to spoil things?" 17 is surprised. "I'm not trying to spoil things. But why should there be one prince for every princess? What if there isn't?" "I wish you would stop talking," says 11, and 17 can hear the others saying, "Yes, and so do I." "But listen," says 17, "what if we've gotten to the end of the princesses, and tomorrow, think of it, tomorrow maybe the cages will open all on their own." There's a moment of horrified silence. Then 5 says, "I can see it now. All of us standing under the tree for the rest of all time, wishing we were back in our cages. Who would we be then?" A tide of agreement washes over the tree. 17, dizzy with the gulf she didn't know existed until this moment, leans her head against the bars. "Free," she whispers to herself. "We'd be free." As the days pass, the princesses begin practicing on each other in earnest. Not the coy glances they tried from cage to cage when their petals first opened, but with frenzied, too bright smiles. After 7 days, longer than they've ever waited, a prince arrives in a carriage with 3 glass windows on each side, drizzled in gold filigree. From high above the others, 17 can see inside, can see the walls and seats trimmed with amethyst tapestry. The horses stand shifting as the footman opens the carriage door. The prince steps out. Even from the top of the tree, 17 can smell a sour, spoiled scent. He is tall and unsmiling. He wears a dark uniform that conforms to his long body, and a hat with a feather that flutters in the breeze. His shoulders are iced with epaulettes, and a chain runs from one bright metal to the next. He studies the remaining cages and goes to 3 right away. He leans in and whispers in her ear. The others watch 3, their faces pressed up against the bars. At first she is beaming, but soon she starts to move away from the soldier prince, shaking her head. He grins and his teeth are white and sharp. He leans in further, hissing his words. When 3 begins to sob, there are murmurs from the others, and when the soldier prince reaches out to touch his palm in 3's cage, the gasps are not envious, but only 17 shouts, "Stop, don't!" As 3's cage elongates, the soldier prince looks up at 17. His eyes are so venomous she feels a shameful flush of relief that he did not choose her. Still sobbing, 3 moves toward the soldier prince's carriage with halting steps. He watches her, rubbing his finger over his lower lip. 3 slows to a stop. She looks up, and her face is tear-stained. "What should I do?" she says. 17 opens her mouth to say what? She clutches the bar of her cage. She tries to speak, but in the end she is silent, just like everyone else.
It isn't until dawn, until 17 is the only princess awake, her sister's slow breathing a comforting tide. It isn't until then that 17 thinks of the right thing to say. Stay here, she should have said. Stay with us. The princess tree begins to shiver in breezes that are no longer balmy. The leaves of the princess trees begin to turn from green to apricot and almond, saffron, and banana. After the long drought, princes began arriving again, this time in dribs and drabs. It's as the days inch by, the princesses are swept away until there are only 4 left. And then the princes stop. 17 counts the days gleefully. She's very sure now that they have gotten to the end of the princes, and the end of the princes mean the end of the cages. She is very sure now that it is only a matter of time before they're all free. She's so sure that it takes a long time before she notices that the sunlight, weaker now, only shines on the tree for half the time. That her knees complain of the sitting position she is always, always in. After 14 days, 17 sees a moving chair in the far distance. She describes it to her sisters. A prince is sitting on a golden throne. The throne, in turn, sits inside a box also made of gold. 3 sides of the box are open, and thin columns rise from each corner to meet the domed roof, which is covered in intricate carvings. 2 servants in tricorn hats carry the golden chair by means of wooden poles, and their progress is slow. As they near, 17 can see that the prince's eyes are closed and his head is lolling. With every snore, his long white beard ripples. When the procession reaches the top of the hill, the servants set their poles down. One puts his hands on his lower back and stretches his neck. The other taps the prince's hand, saying, "Your Highness, we're here," again and again until he's bawling the words. The prince's eyes flutter open. With his servant's help, he steps out of the box and shuffles towards the princess tree. "What do I do now?" he asks in a high, thin voice. The servant hollers, "If it pleases your Highness, choose a princess." "What's a princess?" asked the prince, standing in front of 6. The servant sighs. He takes one of the prince's veined, trembling hands, and without looking at 6, he runs the prince's palm over the cage. The cage spreads open, and 6 stands there, unmoving. This time 17 is ready. "Don't go! You don't have to go!" she calls from the top of the tree. The second servant looks up at her with his hands on her hips. "Shut your mouth," he says. 6 doesn't move. The second servant takes a rope out of his leather bag. "Do I use the rope, your Highness, or will you be a good girl?" Inside the golden chair, the prince is asking in his trembling voice, "Are we going to the princess tree now?" "If I could just," 6 begins, and the servant grabs her arm. He ties one end of the rope around her wrist, then fastens the other side to the chair. 6 slumps. She stares at her feet. 17 is shouting, "Stop, stop!" But she might as well be a leaf or a bird. There is no door to her cage, only waiting, only watching. The servants pick up the poles and set off down the hill. 17 watches herself watch 6, stumbling after them until they are only dots in the distance, digging her fingernails into her palms until they are bloody. The lush softness of the leaves is fading. They are drier every day, and 17 watches the skies, eager for rain in a way she's never been before. When it comes, she cups her hands to catch the drops. She feeds her indigo skirts between the bars and sucks on it when the rain abates. For a moment, the crackling dust of her throat is dampened. 17 looks at the dry leaves, at their gray edges, and wonders how long the princesses can go now without rain. One day at dusk, a playful wind rocks the cages until the 3 princesses drowse, too hungry to really sleep. In the middle of the confused dream of eating an apple and finding a rancid core, there's a thump, and 17 hears 9 whimper. She peers down. There's no prince in sight, but 9's cage is on the ground, on its side. She is looking up at the princess tree, and her eyes are frantic. 17 can see 9's branch below her. The ring is still embedded in the branch, but the bottom looks... Her mind supply's rotten, and she decides to discard it. 4 says in a strained voice, "Are you all right?" Then 17 laughs, because 9 is not all right. Nothing is all right. Nothing. They have been hungry and alone, and they have watched their sisters vanish, and it's getting colder, and 17 is terrified that this is all there is to their lives. Just this. 4 is laughing too, skating on the edge of hysteria. When her giggles trail off, 17 says, "4, can you reach 9's cage? Can you open it?" "Don't be mad," says 4, and 17 can't catch her breath. "Don't be mad, but I won't. I can't. What if..." On the ground, 9 shakes her head and says in a slurred voice, "Did a prince choose me?" She paws at the silver bars. "Am I free?" 4 says, "No, it's your cage. It fell." 17 is thinking about the cage that fell when they were all brand new in the spring, before the princes, the hoop skirt covering something inside, how the flies gathered. "Am I free?" says 9 again. 17 closes her eyes, takes a deep breath. No one will choose her now. On the ground, 9 stares straight ahead. "Am I free?" she says. The silence lasts for so long that 17, straining to hear against the cage bars, rears back and hits her head when 9 speaks again. "What are we for?" she says. 17 feels cold. "What do you mean?" she says, but she knows. "We're the princess? Did the princes come from the tree, or did I dream it?" "Come to the tree?" 9 says. 4 says, yes, every day a prince comes to the tree and chooses a princess. And then the princess goes with him to his castle, and she is so happy. And she wears a white dress with a veil as long as the tree. She eats a feast. She eats so much that she is not hungry, and then she sleeps, lying down on a soft bed. The wind picks up, and 17 watches a leaf shiver, then twirl off the branch and float to the ground beside 9's fallen cage. "I think princes used to come," says 9, and her voice is dreamy. "They used to, but not now." 17 says, "Maybe tomorrow," but she doesn't believe it. 9 says, "If there are no more princes, why are we alive?" 17 says, "I don't know," and hates that she doesn't know. Hates that the answer might be for no reason at all. The answer might be that they are just extra in case of a hoop skirt accident. Maybe they're only alive to wait in their cages to die. "Of course there are more princes," said 4. "Of course there are." And 17 thinks that 4 is trying to convince herself more than anyone else. I watch birds," says 9, and her voice is fading. "I wish..." "What do you wish?" says 4. 9 takes a rattling breath. "It must be so nice. No cage." Then the rattling breath fades too. "This wasn't supposed to happen," says 4. "She wasn't supposed to die. She was supposed to be chosen. Aren't we all supposed to be chosen?" She is crying now. "Are we going to fall too?" 17 thinks that they will fall. She thinks that one of them will fall and die. and that the last one to fall will be so alone. I should have touched Nine's cage. I should have let her out, but I was so stupid. I thought, says 4, which is when she falls. Oh, 4, whispers 17. There is no moonlight, and at first 17 thinks she is seeing fallen stars whirling around 4's cage. 4 says, "Do you see them too?" 17 watches the tiny lights blink on and off. "Yes," she says. "What should we call them?" 4 asks. "They look like little stars," says 17. And then with the force of a blow, she realizes that soon she will be the only one in the world who knows that the blinking lights are called little stars. Soon 4 won't exist at all. "Maybe I'll go with them," says 4, when I'm not here anymore." 17 clears her throat. "Yes," she says, because wailing anguish will not help 4. "Do you remember when 3 pretended to be a bird that day?" says 4. "Do you think you could do that?" 17 says, "Yes, because 4 will die, and pretending to be a bird is the only thing 4 has ever asked of anyone." 17 thinks of that day with 3, when her sisters were full of joy of 3's voice. 17 sings until her throat is thick with tears, and when she finishes, 4 doesn't say anything. She never says anything again. And then 17 loses days. They are scattered moments. No princes come. She watches the dry leaves scuttling, but then the leaves are gone. The bluebells are husk. Then, in a blink, they are gone too. No princes come. The ground turns white. At night, the stars are only in the sky, never on the ground. No princes come. 17 is watching a shiny black beetle waddle along the branch, and she has never eaten a beetle, but she would like to. She's reaching through the cage bars for the beetle, straining, when her cage falls. There's no warning. Her cage is at the top of the tree, and then it isn't. Then her cage is on its side on the ground, and she's lying there panting. She thinks of 9 saying, "Am I free?" and has a terrible urge to laugh. Parts of 9 were free later. Parts of her stuck to fly feet soaring up into the sky. 17 lies on her side, the cage bars digging into her ribs and neck, and her neck is forced at an angle against the top of the cage. She shivers. It's cold now that the sun has gone down, colder than it's ever been, and she thinks something about the cage falling from the tree has deprived her of some kind of warmth too. 17 touches her mouth. She can feel her body growing more parched, sunken, her teeth so big now that her lips can't properly close over them. Her gums are swollen, and she can taste blood in her mouth. She falls into a fitful doze. She dreams that her cage is rolling down the hill faster and faster until it smashes into a wall of stone and bursts into 1,000 pieces. In the dream, she stands and stretches. In the dream, her sisters dance among the bluebells. 17 traces the cage bar, touches the cold white underneath the cage. She brings her hand to her mouth, tries sucking on her fingers, and the white melts in her mouth. The relief of the water is exquisite. 17 pushes against the bar. Yesterday, she could push harder. 9's voice echoes in her head. Why are we alive? 17 wants to be alive for a reason. She wants to be alive for something more than gowns and bellies and feasts. Something more than fascist princes, elegant princes, hateful princes. She wants to run like a horse. She wants to change 3's fate. She wants to pull 14 from the saddle, cut the rope, and set 6 free. She wants 4 to touch 9's cage, and then she wants the 2 of them to climb the tree to the very top. She wants her sisters back. Her fingers and toes start tingling, and then her legs and her scalp, as if her body is buzzing with little stars. And when she can't bear it anymore, she screams without words. She screams until she is howling, until her throat hurts so much she is breathless with pain. She pushes with her arms, her hands, her legs, and then she feels a sponginess at the bottom of the cage. She pushes with her legs again as hard as she can. She hasn't imagined it. She pushes harder. She pushes until she feels the bottom begin to move. The cage has never been enough to contain her fury, so she sets her fury free. The princess tree grows at the top of a hill, spotted with bluebells. 17 cages are growing on 17 branches, and the petals have begun to open, revealing the sleepy princesses inside. They already know their fate. At the bottom of the hill is a small stone cottage. 3 goats are grazing on the grass-covered roof. A stout woman with cropped gray hair comes out of the cottage. She picks up a wooden ladder and walks up the hill. A curious goat trots beside her, and she strokes its head. The woman wears a faded gown that might have been indigo long ago. The skirt is ragged, and the long sleeves are hiked up and pinned back for ease of movement. The 17 princesses blink their new eyes at this apparition. One says in a thin voice, "Pretty prince?" The woman laughs in a creaky laugh. "No, honey." Another caged creature says, "Princess, then?" "No, I'm a person like you." There's a thoughtful silence. The woman climbs the ladder. She stops at the lone cage at the top of the tree. "Hello, 17," she says. The creature inside watches her. The woman runs her palm over the bars of the cage, and it droops and droops until it reaches the ground. When it does, the princess inside steps out. "Do I go with you?" she calls to the woman at the top of the ladder. "Stay with me or go. It's your choice." The word choice is whispered from cage to cage until it begins to mutate, to evolve into "pick me," and the whispers turn to calls, to joyful shouts. The woman steps down 3 rungs and runs her hand over 15's cage, then 16's and 14. She smiles. "I pick you," she says. "I pick all of you." It's a good thing that ended right there. I was about ready to cry.
Well, you made it without breaking into tears.
I did. It was a rough one there at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it starts pulling the strings pretty good there at the end.
It does.
So, what are your thoughts on the fruit of the princess tree?
I love this story. I love this story so much because it is the perfect read aloud type story, because it's a fairy tale, basically. It's a fairy tale about princesses. But it's everything about a fairy tale turned to kind of see it at the ugly angle, and then to have 17 go and release them all. I just love it.
Yeah, it's a fairy tale told in kind of the tradition of how fairy tales actually were told back in the day.
Yeah, it is. And it's just, I don't know, it's wonderful. I love it.
I should say that this reading came about as part of a stretch goal for the Apex Magazine 2023 Kickstarter that's currently in progress. We're funded, and now we're looking to hit some additional goals, including fiction from E. Catherine Tobler. Who doesn't want that? I certainly want it. Writer pay, some original artwork from Godwin Acton and Marcelo Bolivar, And once we break through those, then you'll just have to see what we have in store. We have some good stuff planned. The Kickstarter runs through the morning of August 26th.
Yep, not much time left. So if you've been waiting, now is the time.
So if we hit 500 backers, do you think we'll do this again? Different story, of course.
I would do it again. It's fun. As long as our readers want it. If they're like, please, no more.
Yeah, they may be like, we call mercy. So this story was chosen by our backers. And the second place story was The Day You Spend Forever with Your Dog, which is the one story that came the closest to making me cry when I read it. So maybe if we do that one as a stretch goal, I will read the back half of that when it starts getting really sad.
Yeah, that one's sad. That I would definitely, like, you guys wouldn't be able to understand what I was saying. I'd be so choked up.
Yeah, just don't let your puppy dog be in the same room.
Yeah.
Impossible, right?
Pretty much. He's directly under the table right now.
I have a feeling that one would probably make you tear up due to your affection with your cute little dog.
Yep, it definitely would.
So thank you, Leslie. Thank you, our Kickstarter backers, for making this reading possible. Thank you to the wonderful people behind the scenes who are spending their Sunday night helping us out.
And a big thanks to Sage for letting us read her story. Because we did ask permission before we were like, haha, we're just going to read your story on the internet. So thank you.
Good. Absolutely. Thank you, Sage. And if you want to check out the Kickstarter, the link is in the description. And check out Apex Magazine at apex-magazine.com.